Around the year 1100, there was a city in North America larger than London. Not larger than any city in Europe, larger than London itself. At its peak, tens of thousands of people lived there. Massive earthen pyramids dominated the skyline. Trade networks stretched for hundreds of miles. Religious ceremonies attracted visitors from distant regions. Yet most people have never heard of it. Today, the site is known as Cahokia. Located near present-day St. Louis, Cahokia became the largest urban center north of Mexico long before Europeans arrived. For a time, it looked unstoppable. Population surged. Construction exploded. Power became concentrated in the hands of an elite ruling class. Then, surprisingly fast, everything began to unravel. By the 1300s, the city was largely abandoned. No invading empire destroyed it. No written records explain what happened. The people simply left. So how did one of the greatest cities in North American history rise so quickly and disappear so completely? This is the story of the fall of Cahokia. To understand the mystery, we need to understand just how remarkable Cahokia was. When most people imagine pre-Columbian North America, they picture scattered villages and small tribal communities. Cahokia was something very different. Around the year 1050, something dramatic happened in the Mississippi River floodplain. Archaeologists call it the Big Bang of Cahokia. Within just a few decades, the settlement exploded in size. People began arriving from surrounding regions. New neighborhoods appeared. Monumental construction projects transformed the landscape. The city's centerpiece was Monk's Mound, a gigantic earthwork that still stands today. Built entirely by human labor, it required millions of basketloads of soil. Rising nearly 100 feet high, it covered more ground than the Great Pyramid of Giza at its base. Around it stood dozens of smaller mounds, plazas, homes, workshops, and ceremonial spaces. At its height, estimates suggest between 10,000 and 20,000 people may have lived in and around Cahokia. For comparison, many European cities of the same era were not much larger. This wasn't just a large village. It was a true urban center. And for a while, everything seemed to be working. But here's the thing. Rapid growth creates problems. A city doesn't simply become enormous without consequences. Thousands of people needed food every day. They needed wood for houses, fences, cooking fires, and construction. They needed farmland, lots of it. Evidence suggests forests around Cahokia were heavily cleared. Trees disappeared as demand increased. Without those forests, the environment became more vulnerable to erosion and flooding. Meanwhile, agriculture intensified. Farmers planted huge amounts of maize or corn, which became the foundation of the city's food supply. At first, this specialization likely supported population growth. But relying heavily on a single crop creates risk. If harvests fail, entire communities suffer. And as Cahokia continued expanding, that risk grew larger and larger. The city had become powerful. It had also become fragile. Then archaeologists begin noticing something interesting. Around the 1200s, evidence of stress starts appearing throughout the city. One clue comes from defensive structures. At some point, Cahokia's residents constructed a massive wooden palisade around important parts of the city. This wasn't a simple fence. It required thousands of logs and constant maintenance. Building something that large suggests people were worried about threats. The obvious question is, threats from whom? No one knows for sure. It could indicate conflict with outside groups. It could reflect growing tensions within Cahokia itself. Either way, walls are rarely built during times of peace and stability. Other signs point toward social unrest. Some neighborhoods appear to have been abandoned. Construction projects slowed. Population growth stopped. The city that had once expanded rapidly now seemed to be struggling to maintain itself. And the problems were only beginning. One of the strongest theories involves climate. Cahokia's location offered enormous advantages. The fertile floodplains supported agriculture and trade. But those same rivers could also become dangerous. Evidence from sediments and environmental studies suggests the region experienced major flooding events during Cahokia's later years. Floods can devastate crops. They can destroy homes. They can disrupt transportation and food distribution. At the same time, climate records indicate periods of drought may also have occurred. That's the nightmare scenario for any agricultural society. Too much water at one moment, not enough the next. A city dependent on large-scale farming suddenly faces uncertainty. Food shortages become more likely. Competition for resources increases. Political leaders lose credibility. Social tensions grow. Climate alone may not have destroyed Cahokia, but it could have amplified every existing weakness. Another possibility is that Cahokia suffered from internal divisions. Archaeologists have found evidence suggesting social inequality increased over time. Certain individuals received elaborate burials. Some people appear to have enjoyed privileged status and access to resources. Others did not. One of the most controversial discoveries came from a mound containing evidence of human sacrifice. The findings suggest that some individuals were killed as part of ritual activities associated with elite power. Exactly what these ceremonies meant remains debated. But they reveal something important. Cahokia was not necessarily a harmonious society. Power was concentrated. Religious authority and political authority were deeply connected. As long as the system worked, people may have accepted it. But during periods of environmental stress, food shortages, or political instability, those structures could become vulnerable. A society divided by status often finds it harder to respond to crisis. And once confidence in leaders begins to disappear, decline can accelerate very quickly. What's fascinating is that Cahokia didn't vanish overnight. There was no dramatic final battle, no evidence of a catastrophic invasion. Instead, the city appears to have experienced a long decline. Population gradually decreased. Neighborhoods emptied. Public spaces lost activity. Construction slowed further. Eventually, people began leaving altogether. Some likely moved to smaller communities elsewhere in the Mississippi Valley. Others may have joined related cultural groups across the region. The knowledge and traditions didn't disappear, the city did. By around 1350, Cahokia was largely abandoned. A place that once held thousands of people became quiet. The plazas emptied. The ceremonial centers fell silent. The massive mounds remained. Everything else slowly returned to nature. The frustrating part is that we still don't know exactly why Cahokia fell. Unlike ancient Rome or China, Cahokia left no written historical record explaining its final years. Archaeologists must reconstruct the story from physical evidence. And that evidence points to multiple possible causes: environmental degradation, deforestation, flooding, drought, food shortages, social inequality, political instability, conflict, population decline. The most likely answer may be that no single factor destroyed Cahokia. Instead, several pressures collided at the same time. A city built on rapid growth eventually encountered challenges it could not overcome. When environmental stress met social tension, the system began to crack. Once enough people lost faith in the city, leaving may have seemed easier than staying. Today, the great mounds of Cahokia still rise from the Illinois landscape. They're quiet now. No crowded markets. No ceremonies. No rulers standing atop Monk's Mound looking out over a city of thousands. Just earth, grass, and silence. Yet those mounds remind us of something important. Long before European ships crossed the Atlantic, complex cities, powerful leaders, and vast trade networks already existed in North America. Cahokia wasn't a forgotten village. It was one of the greatest cities the continent had ever seen. And despite decades of research, one question still lingers. How does a city that once seemed destined to dominate an entire region end up abandoned by nearly everyone who built it? For Cahokia, the answer remains buried somewhere beneath the soil, waiting to be discovered.